Welcome to Cinema Chop Shop. Watch, chop, retrofit.
Well, if we're talking about beers, do you want to start with a beer check-in?
Sure.
What beer are you drinking?
I'm drinking Land Shark.
Land Shark who? We're going to need a bigger glass.
There you go. Welcome to Cinema Chop Shop. This is a movie podcast that records almost bi-weekly when we're on a roll, but this month we're really going to be tryhards.
Because it's spooky season.
It's spooky season, and traditionally in October we do a theme month.
Uh-huh.
And we're kind of shaking things up a little bit this year. Mm-hmm. Instead of doing horror, we're doing kind of horror adjacent.
Kind of. I think it's still horror movies, but give them the money shot. What is it?
We're doing knockoffs.
Knockoffs.
We're going to focus each week on an iconic film and discuss the knockoff movies that followed suit in an attempt to cash in on the popularity of the granddaddy.
And I think there definitely is a commercial aspect to it, but we're also talking about influence.
True, true.
There's movies that influenced so many other movies, and we're trying to get at the core of that.
Yep, and we're reeling in a big one today. We're going to be talking about Jaws and Jaws knockoffs.
The villain from Dr. No?
Yes.
No, that's not the right James Bond movie, but
Moonraker.
Thank you.
Richard Keel? What's his... Anyway.
Something like that.
Okay, well, let's talk about who's here. We've got the whole gang. We've got Joey.
Hello.
We got Todd.
Hello.
And we have Travisito.
Do you remember a time when you could say gang without it having any connotation?
Like Little Rascals, our gang.
It's our gang.
Welcome back, everybody. This is it's been a hot minute since we saw everyone.
I missed you guys. I saw Joey at a grocery store the other day.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. We shop at the same Food Lion.
Very good. Speaking of beer, we're going to lead off with a trivia question about Jaws.
Okay.
In the movie Jaws, Quint, the shark hunter, drinks a can of beer on board. Tell me what the name of that beer is.
Is it a real beer?
It is a real beer.
Okay. I want to say like an Old Milwaukee.
Nope.
I'm going to guess a Coors Light.
Nope.
I'm going to go for that part of the country, maybe a Sam Adams.
You're on the right thought process, but Sam Adams didn't hit until much later. Okay. We're going to go with Rhode Island's own Narragansett.
Gotcha.
And I couldn't get my hands on any, but I really wanted to.
And sometimes you find it around here. They've got a couple of, like, what are they, Rattlers or something that they sell around here?
Yeah, but this was the old original.
Okay.
So back to Jaws. Steven Spielberg's adaptation of Peter Benchley's novel.
Which I didn't even realize until doing research this week that the movie was based on a film. Or, excuse me, the movie was based on a book. That Peter Benchley also wrote several other books in the same kind of genre.
Yeah, I'll be talking about one of those. So this baby came out in 1975. So Spielberg was still, putting in effort.
Shawn was just graduating high school.
I was just graduating high school. No.
Wait. Only two of us were alive.
Yeah. In this room, two of us were alive.
Yeah.
The film was a great success and iconic in that whether or not you've seen Jaws or not, you know the music. Mm-hmm. You know the tropes. Because the tropes have been played out in other films that are completely unrelated to
big time
man-eating sharks. So the film, I think, represents a certain iconography that is unmistakable. Joey, you said that you might be a detractor when it comes to Jaws.
Yeah, I know that this is probably going to be a lot of slathering love on the movie, but I've always been kind of anti-Jaws.
Any particular reason?
What's your beef?
Okay, I have several. I think that this isn't so much aimed at the first movie itself, which isn't egregious on this front, but the sequels really play into something I fucking hate about movies, which is like fostering fear, irrational fear of the natural world, and animals that don't fucking behave the way that animals do in real life.
Right.
You can make that argument about Jaws, but I give it a little bit of leeway on that. The sequels would have us believe that a shark follows a man to a different part of the
Bahamas,
coastline,
right?
in order to avenge its mate or some shit like that, and that's stupid.
Which one was with Michael Caine?
That was Jaws 3.
And that one's on like an island, if not the Bahamas, right?
I think there's an underwater like tunnel kind of thing because it had the whole 3D deal. Yeah, like a C-Lab thing where anyway. But we're not talking about the sequels. We're going to talk about the
Actual
OG,
Jaws.
the OG with its very simple storyline. You've got a man who has an irrational fear of the water, yet he's the sheriff in an island town,
which is Amity.
Which is strange.
Now, did this come out before or after the original Amityville Horror?
It came out before the film.
Before the movie Amityville Horror?
Yes. I guess if you had to describe him by the book, I mean, he's a nice enough guy, but he's just doing his job. And he is pragmatic in that here's a threat. We need to remove people from said threat. And then City Hall comes in. You've got the mayor who is extremely against this whole hysteria of a shark.
Well, this is
It's also 4th of July.
4th of July weekend, folks.
Well, this is a trope that pops up in these movies. There is oftentimes someone with capitalist interests
Absolutely.
who wants to deny the problem for monetary reasons.
I told Travis last week when I was rewatching this, it struck me how similar the mayor's reaction to the threat of the shark reminded me of the early days of COVID and how the government reacted to it's no big deal, everything's fine, let's all carry on as normal, until it became obvious that we could not. And it was just like, wow, it's truth in advertising. It's life imitating art, or vice versa.
The pandemic was Jaws?
Yeah.
Holy shit. You
Yeah.
guys remember when we're Lysoling down our cereal boxes?
And then moving on beyond the official, you have the crusty sea barnacle who's gonna Quint. He's gonna hunt that shark. He'll do it for you if you hire me.
Played by the great Robert Shaw.
Robert Shaw, yes. And then you have the expert, played by Timothy Busfield. I'm kidding.
Mr. Holland.
Mr. Holland's opus. I say Timothy Busfield because he always reminds me of Richard Dreyfuss.
I don't know who Timothy Busfield is.
You don't remember Timothy Busfield? Think of the uncle from Field of Dreams that was making when the daughter was choking. He said, "Oh, stop it, kid! You need to be quiet."
If you build it, they will come.
He was in 30-something. Anyway. And then, of course, you have the Beast. The mindless, man-eating beast that, depending on how you look at it, is out for revenge, and the sequels. Or not, I guess it was dead. It was its progeny. But,
yeah.
But,
so I want to chime in a little bit on the archetypes.
Hit it.
Because I think that there's multiple different archetypes that you could ascribe to these different characters. Like, for example, the main character, the Chief Brody, he's described as the responsible family man, the guy who's maybe irrationally afraid of the water, but wants to protect the town. You could also call him the hero, right? Then you've got Quint. He's either the hunter or the mentor, right?
Right.
Because he's wizened. And then you've got...
He's Captain Ahab.
Very much so, yeah.
Richard Dreyfuss's character, Matt Hooper, is, according to this, a shapeshifter.
A shapeshifter?
A shapeshifter, because Hooper is a marine biologist and shark expert who comes to Amity Island to assist in dealing with the shark. He represents the archetype of the shapeshifter because his character is multifaceted. Initially, he seems like a bookish scientist, but he later reveals himself to be brave and resourceful as he joins Brody in confronting the shark.
My favorite part of this movie is the camaraderie that builds between those three guys out on the ocean when they get drunk and start singing. My bigger beef with the movie, other than my rant that I had earlier, is that until they get out into the ocean, the movie's fucking dull. Like,
Yeah.
I understand that Jaws is iconic and all that, and y'all can at me if you don't want to, if you want to take me to count on this,
Let's add
but
Joey R. Poole
the
on
movie
X.
itself, it's J. Richard Poole, actually. The movie itself is fucking boring until they all get out to sea, and that sequence is fucking amazing. It is really good, but
I will agree with you on that because there is a lot of setup that has to take place. Now,
I like the opening scene a lot.
I think
hippie party on the beach.
Yeah,
girl
yeah.
gets naked, runs into the ocean.
one thing I
Like,
did
"Here, I'm drunk.
one thing I did appreciate that was depicted was that the fact that the shark didn't care how young your kid was.
Ooh.
The dog, he didn't care about a dog. He didn't care if you're a
Sharks
kid.
don't care?
The sharks don't care, and the sharks are going to go get you. But enough about the movie. I think
The
that
movie Jaws itself?
Enough about it.
All right.
Unless you got something else to say.
Hey, man, knock it off.
Let's knock it off. So knockoffs, they started hitting pretty quickly thereafter. I think that there was a TV movie called Shark Kill in 1976 that kind of started the whole domino effect. There was a movie called Dogs.
Dogs?
Yeah. Ants. Crocodile.
They're not even being clever. They're just saying the name of the animal.
I know, right? Yeah. But in 1977, the knockoffs really started hitting. That's when you had the Deep, Orca, the Car, which I talked to you about earlier in the week, just a couple of days ago. It's about a fucking killing car that does exactly what Jaws did.
Very interesting that you bring that up, though, because Steven Spielberg's previous film was
The Duel.
Duel,
Yeah.
which was somebody being basically haunted or tracked by
A trucker,
semi-truck.
a faceless trucker.
Yes.
Snow Beast in 77. We had Grizzly in 76. Mm-hmm. There was a film that came out of Brazil called Bacalhau.
What does that mean?
I don't know, but it's pretty
Portuguese for
awesome because
baklava.
their shitty jaws look like one of those old-fashioned fishing lures with the giant painted eyes on the side.
Nice.
They even use plastic skeletons floating in the water to represent people who had been killed by this beast.
that's awesome.
Corman did his own version, Up from the Depths in 79.
He's involved in one of the ones that I'm going to talk about later, too.
Every manner of beast that you could imagine being a killing machine hit it. The Last Shark came out in 81. That was blocked by Universal because it was such a complete ripoff that they were able to prove it and stop its distribution. Before the show, I was commenting that Mario Bava's son, Lamberto Bava, made a film called Devilfish in 1984.
Devilfish.
There is a series of movies called The Last Shark, Deep Jaws, and Cruel Shark, all three of which use the exact same footage of an explosion.
I've got one that does this
movies.
as well, and it's not one of those three. So,
as a matter of fact, Cruel Shark came out in 95, and Hulk Hogan was in it.
The Hulkster?
The Hulkster.
I think that's my movie, Cruel Jaws, though.
Okay, well maybe they've those movies the names kind of flip flop a lot, yeah, depending on where it is and what
Depending
format.
on if it was the theatrical
I'll have
Yeah,
more to say
or
about
the
or the
DVD, the VHS. release.
Come on, let's get real. So yeah, I mean, and even today, if you go on like Tubi, you can do a search for Shark or Jaws, and you'll see this glut of quick, made for direct release films that imitate the original in varying degrees of success. I would be remiss if I didn't point out that there's also a Broadway show called The Shark is Broken about the movie Jaws and when the shark prop was under repair and all the actors were just kind of hanging out and killing time.
There's also a documentary about the same subject. Was that the title of the documentary?
I think so, probably.
The Shark is
So
Broken?
it's been pivoted into a Broadway
The Shark
show.
is working. The Shark is still broken. Something like that.
Yeah. And Robert Shaw's son is playing Robert Shaw in this
Brilliant.
Broadway show. All right, so without further ado, let's jump into some knockoffs because I want to hear what everybody watched and what you thought about your movies. We'll start clockwise from me. Joey, you're up.
All right, so I tried to identify 3 different strains of Jaws knockoffs. Some of them aren't, I think, true knockoffs. I'll get to that when I talk to them a little bit later. The first one I'm going to say is very much a knockoff. It was one of that first wave of knockoffs that Shawn mentioned. 1978, Roger Corman was involved with this movie as a producer. It is Piranha.
Oh, Piranha, the original Piranha.
1978. Yeah, spawned. Spawned.
You also said the first wave.
This one is a true knockoff. I think it very much is kind of like freshwater Jaws.
Piranha has way more titties than Jaws, though.
It does, and this is one of the movies that I watched. This is one of the first. I don't know if we qualify this as horror or not, but it's in the vein. It's it's one of the first grown up horror movies that I watched at way too early in age. So yeah, I do remember the titties. This one I remember scaring me way more than Jaws did because
the little teeth.
I was not all about that salt life. Yeah, I grew up in the swamp, so I was all about the creek and the swamp, and the piranha seemed much more something that might actually happen to me.
I'm with you there.
So we say that, and we also have to realize that piranhas are only in like South America, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
not these piranha.
We have a thing in this world called invasive species, where outside organisms get introduced into an environment, and could that not happen here?
There's a cousin of the piranha, the pacu, which actually is invasive in several of the lake and river systems here in the southeast.
What?
It's a vegetarian fish. It doesn't eat meat like the piranhas. But it's worth noting also, to my point earlier, there's never been a documented piranha attack on a human being.
Ever?
So that is a little bit overplayed, I think.
Is it
but in this film, these aren't just piranhas.
Is it because there was nobody there to document it? Because the piranhas ate all of them?
Because they ate all of them.
Perhaps. But in this film, true to Roger Corman style, these aren't just piranhas. These are genetically engineered radioactive piranhas, which have been engineered or were engineered to help us win the Vietnam War. They were actually, and I didn't pick up on this as a kid, but
clearly it worked.
Well, it was a secret project to create piranha, which could live in the cold water of the rivers in North Vietnam. And it worked. And the movie, as you might imagine, revolves around these piranha. I'm going to start saying piranha.
I like it.
Because that's how they pronounce it in the movie.
Is there an enye?
No, I guess that's Portuguese. Okay. This is like a British, a Brazilian
Yeah, they
speak
Portuguese in Brazil.
The movie revolves around these experimental piranha who are accidentally released by a woman who is looking for two missing teenagers who, of course, get eaten in the first scene. Again, very reminiscent of what happens, Travis mentioned earlier with Jaws. Same structure. She picks up, she kind of hooks up with this backwoods drunk along the way. And they end up inadvertently releasing these piranha into the waters. And I won't spoil it from there, but they do a lot of chomping, a lot of eating. The movie itself is kind of a mixed bag. The way that they did the special effects, it's you can't really have, like with Jaws, you have a huge animatronic shark. You can't really do that with piranhas because they're very small.
You just have people under the water just kind of going like flicking waves and stuff.
Yeah, chopping up the water, chumming the water to make it look red, and then people on top of the water are writhing in pain.
Yep.
And then you get a couple of underwater shots, and they're mostly just stock footage of piranhas with like a red, what I'm assuming is a red filter on the screen to make the water look bloody.
Like blood.
Written by John Sayles, who wrote a movie that we just discussed not too long ago in our baseball episode, 8 Men Out.
Okay.
Directed.
Is he the one who did Brother from Another Planet?
He did.
Okay, he did.
Thank you.
Directed by Joe Dante. Gremlins 2, The Howling, which I just watched recently.
Yeah. A great segment in the Twilight Zone movie.
Yeah, and another, The Howling, also notable for another one of my very early in life exposure to titties.
Nice.
This movie actually references Jaws a couple of times. There's like a I can't remember exactly how this happens, but there's a framed picture of, which is very clearly the animatronic shark from Jaws. So it is very much a knockoff.
So on the grand scale of knockoffs, any originality factor? Are you saying it's a straight knockoff? Is it kind of a 5 out of 10?
It kind of does its own thing. It's one distinction is that the great white in Jaws is a great white shark. These are souped up piranhas, genetically, radioactively engineered piranhas. I think that I would definitely count this one as a knockoff just because it's very much an attempt to cash in on Jaws.
Yep.
It seeks to do for freshwater what Jaws did to saltwater. It has its own kind of thing a little bit, but it is what it is.
They weren't trying to be salty about it.
Hey. All right, moving right along. Todd's chomping at the bit. Let's hear what you got.
Chomping at the bit. A good segue there for a film that I am going to discuss from 1980 called Alligator. So we got Jaws, now we got Alligator, who also, I guess, would have Jaws as well. This film, interestingly, was also written by John Sayles from Piranha.
No shit.
He eventually would be nominated for a couple of Oscars for his screenwriting, and directed a lot of movies as well. And is a novelist, so he's actually a really good writer. But anyway, the director of this is a guy named Louis Teague, and he did another Jaws-esque movie that for some reason didn't cross my mind when we talked about this episode, but Cujo.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so he directed Cujo as well. The film stars Robert Forster, who later was in Jackie Brown. He was in Delta Force. So really good actor. And so this movie, the premise is that at the beginning of the film, a baby alligator that is bought as a pet, but from a street vendor, gets flushed down a toilet.
Like that urban legend.
Yes. Ends up in a sewer, consumes radioactive material from a lab that they're dumping illegally their radioactive materials into the sewer. And 12 years later, fast forward, and now it's this mutated alligator that is stalking people from the subway of New York. This movie actually is a movie that the critics kind of liked. It had like 85% on Rotten Tomatoes, and so it's a well-regarded film. One reason I think it's well-regarded is because it's very self-aware of the fact that it is ripping off Jaws, and so it makes a point of sort of spoofing, or not. Probably spoofing is the wrong word, but of
satirizing.
Satirizing, yes, a lot of the familiar elements of those movies.
Yeah.
So Robert Forster plays a detective who gets in out of his depth because initially they think they're hunting a serial killer because all these mauled people start showing up.
That must have been a really bad forensics team.
Yeah, bad detective.
Right.
You know, the jaw marks look like an alligator, but that couldn't be right.
Yeah.
Well, it'd be a serial killer.
They do make quips to that effect. I can't remember a specific one, but there are little lines in there that the movie is aware, that this is kind of silly. So what ends up happening, though, is Forster, they introduce a love interest for him, who is an expert on alligators and reptilian critters, who then helps him investigate this alligator. And it is kind of weird because why is a cop trying to hunt down an alligator? But in any case, and again, the movie's self-aware of that. He's a renegade cop, though, too, because you have some of the same elements from Jaws. You have a character similar to the mayor, who in this case is the city commissioner, who wants to keep all this quiet because he has political aspirations and he doesn't want people to know that there's this there's an election coming up, and he doesn't want people to know that there's this crazy alligator.
I think that's a major
rampant
theme in Jaws. So.
Yep. Yeah, and so the movie plays up kind of this romance between the detective and the woman. They keep making fun of Robert Forster's receding hairline. So they're making it. I think they do that to make it clear that they understand that he's not like a typical leading man who this beautiful woman. I think the actress's name was Sue Lyon, I believe.
All right, on the big knockoff scale, what do you think?
It is a knockoff, but it is aware that it is a knockoff, and it leans into it and kind of makes fun of itself a little bit. And I think that's why critics kind of liked it and why it's memorable.
Travisito.
Yes, sir.
You're up.
All right, so I'm going to talk about a movie that we've expounded upon at length on this show. It's a movie called Tremors from 1990. And I'm doing my knockoffs in chronological order.
Okay.
So
should be noted that Travis is a Tremors fanboy.
Yes. I am.
Yeah.
Big time. It's a cult classic. It's about giant underground worms terrorizing a small desert town. It exhibits several influences from Jaws.
Dune.
And what?
And Dune.
Yeah, true. I didn't think about that. There's no spice. 3 ways that Tremors is influenced by Jaws. 1. Hidden threat. Much like Jaws, Tremors relies on the concept of a hidden and relentless threat. In Jaws, the audience is kept in suspense as the great white shark remains largely unseen until well into the film. Similarly, in Tremors, the underground graboids are concealed beneath the desert sands, and their full form is not revealed until later in the movie. This hidden threat creates tension and fear as the characters grapple with an unknown danger. Next, Small Town Under Siege. Both films are set in an isolated, tight-knit community that come under siege from a monstrous threat. In Jaws, it's the coastal town of Amity, as we know. Amity Island, I should say. While Tremors, it's the desert town of Perfection, Nevada. In both cases, the townsfolk are initially unaware of the true nature of the threat and must band together to defend themselves against a deadly creature. The isolation of these communities intensifies the sense of vulnerability and the need for resourcefulness. Number 3, character dynamics and humor. Tremors takes a page from Jaws in terms of character dynamics and humor. Both films are a group of main characters who must work together to overcome the threat. In Jaws, the camaraderie and interactions among Chief Brody, Quint, and Hooper provide moments of humor and tension relief amidst the danger. Much like you were talking about with the first scene on the boat where they all get drunk and kind of show their true selves to each other. Tremors similarly features a group of characters with distinct personalities, including Val and Earl, and they use humor as a coping mechanism. The witty banter and camaraderie amongst the characters in Tremors serve to balance the horror elements with humor, much like Jaws.
So, refresh my memory. In Tremors, those worms, obviously, the graboids, aren't real. Is there an explanation for why they're there? Are they alien? Is there some sort of
Well, they don't explain that in the first film. There's no there's a quote where the scientist, the Hooper character, she says there's no evidence of this in the fossil record.
Okay.
So they don't explain where they came from in the first movie. In conclusion, Tremors was influenced by Jaws through its use of a hidden, menacing threat, the portrayal of a small town under siege, and the incorporation of humor and camaraderie among the characters. These elements help Tremors pay homage to the classic creature feature while carving out its own unique place in the genre.
All right, well then I'm going to jump in with mine, then we'll do an intermission, and we'll finish up with all of our other stuff. 1977's Tentacles. This was directed by...
Shawn loves tentacle porn.
Yes. It was directed by Ovidio Assonitis.
Is this a Spanish name?
Assonitis? It's Italian.
Ovidio Assonitis.
There's a lot of Italian loafers in this movie. This is, in true Italian fashion, a lot of American actors just cashing in on a paycheck. You got John Huston.
Nice.
You have Shelley Winters, Claude Akins, Rio Bravo. You would know him. And
I know him from the Twilight Zone episode, The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street.
Yep. Henry Fonda and Bo Hopkins from American Graffiti.
You've got a lot of, or a couple of Hollywood royalty names there.
So there's a shaky premise. Henry Fonda, not Peter Fonda. Jesus.
Different.
Henry Fonda owns a company that's making some sort of tunnel under the water, and the company is using some sort of high frequency that's making the fish act crazy. It's a shaky premise at best.
No, I get it. Yeah, so they're drilling a tunnel.
But it's making the fish in underwater life crazy.
Yeah.
Naturally, this is going to piss off a giant octopus, and he's going to be an asshole. It starts out the film. He nabs a baby out of a stroller. It's off camera, but it happens. Which in Jaws,
do you see a tentacle grabbing the baby?
No, you don't even see it.
Come on.
So in Jaws fashion, you do have a relentless killer that doesn't care about the age of the victim.
Remind me the year.
77.
So we're still doing practical effects. Tentacles are difficult to do practical effect-wise.
This film's noteworthy in that they spent nearly $1 million on a artificial octopus prop for the film. The minute they put it in the water, it sank straight to the bottom of the ocean, and they had to get it out. But Bo Hopkins plays kind of your Richard Dreyfuss character. He's the expert, the underwater expert. A tedious film in that Shelley Winters, her part is extraneous. She spends the entire movie getting these two boys ready for a yacht race. And I say yacht, it's like just like a little catamaran kind of sailboat kind of thing.
Sounds like grooming.
And yeah, right? But it's setting up a big scene where there's like hundreds of boys out in the ocean, and they've got like their little sailboats, and the octopus is coming for them. Typical underwater beast that, you know, is a relentless killer, doesn't care. There are orcas that come to the rescue. They attack the octopus at the end of the film. I don't know
Thank
why.
God for
Yeah,
the
Bo's like an orca trainer at the SeaWorld thing, and he puts them in this giant like submarine type tank and hauls them behind a boat. They get out. They attack the octopus, and there's like, imagine if you will, an oven mitt painted to look like an orca going poking a giant, you know, like squishy octopus.
I'll watch that all day.
That's the movie.
Yes. Yeah.
So cheese factor is pretty high in this one. There are about 3 or 4 similarities to the structure of Jaws. So on the rip-off, knockoff scale, I consider this one to be pretty high.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. It just occurred to me, as a kid, and probably well to an older age than it should have been, I always thought octopi, I guess, were much bigger than they actually are because of movies like Tentacles, where they're big, giant, and they're actually very small. Well, and I remember, you know, going somewhere and seeing them.
Well, think about some of like the old etchings from like the seafaring days of like the giant octopus enveloping an entire ship. Yeah. So there's a lot of mythology and legend that kind of goes into that.
I'm going to pitch a creature feature here: the octopossum.
Oh, nice. Ooh. The tail of the tentacles.
There's 8 tails.
Yeah, I like it. One last thought about this: the company that Henry Fonda owns. The movie just glosses over the fact at the end of the movie there's no repercussions for his company. There's no fines. They were
fine. They had insurance.
There's no comeuppance at all.
Sounds like pretty realistic.
There's no follow up on Shelley Winters in the movie. Like, she gets the kids to the thing, and
she probably ran away.
One of the kids dies, and it's her neighbor's kid, and that's it. We don't see her anymore. Yeah, none of the subplots have any resolution at all.
Gotcha.
Structurally, it's a shitty script. That's our first round. We'll come back from the break with our remaining 2 rounds.
Yeah, we're going to have to go quicker in the second half.
Well, yeah, we've kind of dilly-dallied, but we know what we're doing now.
Yeah.
So before we do, let's say...
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby and get ourselves some
Swedish fish.
Yes.
Yum, yum. It's time for a tasty and refreshing snack. We promise to satisfy your hunger, your thirst, your sweet tooth. So visit our refreshment center now. Let's go.
And we're back.
Hey, thanks. Welcome back from the break. 3 out of 4 of us peed in the yard.
Yep.
I have a bladder of steel.
That's got to be painful at sometimes, though. Like when you're trying to sleep.
You're probably just showing off. I bet you'll be.
He's going to pee himself on the way home just to save face.
I do pee outside, I think, more than the average person. Yeah,
I think it's a rite of manhood because we can pee standing up. And sure, you might get arrested for indecent exposure, but if that's what you got to do.
If you can't piss in your own yard, then, I mean.
We're going to dive back in. We're going into round 2.
Uh-huh.
Joey, you're up.
This one is going to score pretty low on your knockoff scale, I think. One might argue that this isn't actually a knockoff, except that I think in the post-Jaws world, because my feelings about the movie notwithstanding, it is iconic, and it is the shark movie, and it is arguably the first blockbuster. So the influence of Jaws is impossible to deny. Any movie that features a shark in the post-Jaws world owes some sort of debt to Jaws. So 2003's Open Water.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to go Sharknado.
Well, Holt.
Okay. Hold for applause.
Hold your tongue.
So open water is not necessarily a a Jaws knockoff, except that it is very much in the influence of Jaws. Because as I said earlier, it's impossible to make a shark movie without having Jaws in the back of your mind, right? Open Water, 2003, directed by Chris Kentis, who did a few other things, but nothing that you've heard of. This is actually a very good film. Have you guys seen it?
Never.
It's the plot concern. It's very, very loosely based on a real event. But the plot concerns a husband and wife who kind of go off on their own during a group scuba diving excursion.
Sweet.
And then there's a Home Alone moment where they miscount when everybody gets back on the boat and they get left behind, basically.
Kevin!
Most of the movie after the first act setup is just these two people floating in the open water. And their relationship, which is already under some stress, starts to kind of unravel a little bit. They start bickering. They're out there for, I don't know how long, several days, but hunger starts to be a factor. You know, they're griping at each other. All the, frayed ends of sanity in their relationship kind of get exposed. And they just very slowly start noticing that there are sharks in the water. And they just kind of start picking away at them.
One by one?
Yeah, I won't give too much away here.
Because you want people to watch it.
Yeah, it is a very good movie. Don't necessarily expect a happy ending, I guess I would say. The sharks are almost like a metaphor here for like all the outside forces conspiring to, do damage upon their relationship. You don't see the sharks very often in this one. It's very subtle, very low key. And again, I wouldn't call it necessarily a knockoff of Jaws, but any shark movie obviously has Jaws as a touchstone. This one I think is a very good film, and it does a disservice to call it a knockoff, I think.
Okay.
Fair
enough.
Over to Todd.
Toddley.
All right. So my next one is a 1984 Ozploitation film. So we got the Aussies represented here with a film called Razorback. So Razorback refers to a wild boar.
That's what I was going to say.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so that's what the Aussies apparently call a wild boar.
I'm looking for my pig.
Yeah. So,
as they do in Arkansas as well.
Yeah. So this film was directed by a guy named Russell Mulcahy, who 2 years later would direct Highlander with Sean Connery. Yep. And it was written by a guy Everett
Christopher Lambert.
And the fabulous Freebirds from WCW fame are in Highlander as well.
Right, yep.
I'm sure glad
Michael
we're
P.S.
staying on
Hayes.
topic.
Please.
Yeah. Written by a guy named Everett DeRoach, who wrote a movie that I like a lot called Road Games with Stacy Keach. Have you ever seen that? If you haven't, I
have not. It. Love Stacy Keach.
Yep. So, in any case, Razorback, wild boar movie. So, thinking about the Jaws elements that might be similar. So, you do have a Captain Ahab element. Yeah. At the beginning of the movie, this grandfather is babysitting his grandson, and this wild boar destroys the house and drags off the grandson and presumably eats him while the grandfather's babysitting for him. And then nobody believes the grandfather that this is what happened because the kid disappears without a trace. So he gets put on trial for murdering his grandson, essentially, but is...
Didn't the same thing happen with a dingo in Australia? And there was the famous
dingo
case
ate my baby.
Dingo
ate my baby. Yep, similar.
Although they exonerated that woman like decades later, a dingo really did eat her baby.
Right. Well, in this case,
Australia's
similarly,
that's where the platypus is from.
Similarly, a razorback really did eat this guy's grandson. He was acquitted because of a lack of evidence, but the townsfolk, most of them didn't believe him. Anyway, so he becomes...
You're kidding me. The small town that was under siege, you didn't buy into the...
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
So he becomes obsessed razorback hunter. Meanwhile...
It's a real quint.
Yeah.
Yes. So meanwhile, out in New York City... these landlubbers, this woman who is a environmentalist and who hates hunters and is trying to set out to expose them.
She's the Hooper.
Something like that, yes. She goes out to the outback to interview these hunters and basically embarrass them, I guess, or expose what they're doing.
And then Paul Hogan puts her in her place.
We're not there yet.
Okay.
Raw movie.
That's not a Razorback.
So anyway, there are these Aussies that have a factory where they're killing animals to make dog food, pet food, essentially. That's what she's there to expose. Anyway, I don't want to belabor the plot too much. Eventually, though, she gets killed by one of these Razorbacks.
And then roll credits.
And the crowd goes wild. Yay!
Her boyfriend comes out to Australia to find out what happened. He flies out there to find out what happened and investigate. Okay? He teams up with the Captain Ahab guy, essentially, to find this Razorback. Okay. So, and in the meantime, you have these kind of crazy townies who are trying to put the kibosh on their investigation because they have capitalist interests, just like they want to deny that there's really this big giant Razorback
because it's
that
4th
exists.
of July.
Yep. Well, I can't remember if there was any particular but there was capitalist interest of some kind for denying that this thing actually existed. So that was one element that was very similar to, of course, the Jaws setup. And so, so that's basically the premise of the movie. They spend the movie hunting. Oh, another thing that I don't know that we've mentioned about Jaws movies that's common is that they save showing you the critter for much of the movie.
Yeah.
So we see a bunch of
you don't see it.
You see a bunch of kills, but you don't actually see the creature until much later. And so this one, similarly, we don't see him or the Razorback until the very end, towards the end. And the practical effects are hokey, but also kind of cool. So I really liked it. And I'll tell you the other thing about this movie is the cinematography is absolutely fantastic. Quentin Tarantino and I believe Steven Spielberg are both fans of this movie.
Right on.
Travis, you're up next.
All right, so this is the moment you've all been waiting for, I'm sure.
Okay.
I'm going to compare Jaws to one of the classic erotic thrillers of the 1990s.
I was curious about this. Go ahead.
Basic Instinct.
Please.
So Basic Instinct is a neo-noir thriller.
I thought you were joking about this.
That explores themes of murder, seduction, and psychological intrigue. While it is a different genre and narrative from Jaws, there are some indirect influences in the way that they approach certain aspects of storytelling and filmmaking. Here are 3 ways that Jaws
in this essay, I will.
Basic Instinct. 1. Sensationalism and controversy. Both Jaws and Basic Instinct generated considerable controversy upon their release. Jaws was notorious for creating a widespread fear of sharks and even leading to some shark culling. Culling, I guess they were killing off sharks.
Yep.
Despite being a fictional story. Basic Instinct also courted controversy due to its explicit sexual content and themes of bisexuality, making it a topic of debate and discussion upon its release. In this sense, both films use controversy to generate interest and attention. Number 2, suspense and thrills. Jaws is known for its masterful use of suspense and tension-building techniques. While Basic Instinct is primarily a psychological thriller, it shares a commonality with suspense elements, keeping viewers guessing about the true nature of the characters and their motivations, just as Jaws had audiences on the edge of their seats when the shark attacks. Basic Instinct keeps viewers on the edge of its plot twist.
The last time, no.
And psychological games. Finally, iconic characters. Jaws introduced iconic characters like Chief Brody, Quint, and Hooper, who have become ingrained in popular culture. Similarly, Basic Instinct gave rise to memorable characters, most notably Catherine Trammell, played by Sharon Stone. Catherine's enigmatic and seductive personality made her the memorable character in the realm of erotic thrillers. While the character in both films served different purposes and come from different genres, their impact on the audience's perception of the films is significant. Number 4, the score. When she's reaching for the ice pick in Basic Instinct, it's almost a da-da, da-da, da-da. So, in conclusion, Basic Instinct may not share direct narrative or thematic similarities with Jaws, but it has been seen to be influenced by Jaws in terms of generating controversy and publicity, using suspense to engage the audience, and creating iconic characters that leave a lasting impression on viewers.
I was really waiting for you to point out that much like we talked about Jaws, you don't actually see the creature. You don't get a clear glimpse of it, much like Sharon Stone's vagina.
It's slightly blurred.
Yeah. You can almost sort of,
almost there.
What are you going to do?
Flash.
Arrest me for smoking?
My next film is The Deep from 1977. Directed by Peter Yates, based on another Benchley novel. So, obviously, there's your...
Peter Benchley, the guy who wrote Jaws.
Correct. It stars Robert Shaw.
No shit.
In this film. So, another tie that binds.
What's our year?
77.
Okay.
It also has Jacqueline Bisset.
So this was hot on the heels of Jaws.
Yeah, right after. Nick Nolte, a very young Nick Nolte. Louis Gossett Jr. playing a Haitian.
Okay. I can buy it. At least it wasn't Nick Nolte playing a Haitian.
And Eli Wallach.
Oh,
The
wow.
Good, the Bad, and the Ugly
Yeah.
film. The similarities are pretty loose in this, but there are enough to make it eligible for the episode. If you like diving, this is a good movie. You love diving, it's a good movie. There's an opening credit sequence with Jacqueline Bisset diving, and she's wearing a white T-shirt. That was pretty scandalous at the time.
Yeah.
And even today, I was like, props.
We got nipple action?
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
Mad props to her for that.
I'm a fan.
So you've got these amateur divers off the coast of Bermuda. They find a relic, and then they eventually come in contact with Robert Shaw's character, who is... he's not a salty dog like he was in Jaws. He's more of an erudite man of the world who knows a thing or two about treasure. Treasure. And so they go on this big quest to go and find this treasure trove that's in a relatively recent shipwreck, which is kind of weird. They have to figure out why. Why are these things in there? Beside the gold that they find that has a certain amount of provenance, there's also a whole shit ton of these little ampules of morphine. Yes, morphine, yes. And naturally, the Haitian Louis Gossett Jr. wants that morphine too. So there's a lot of backstabbing,
so he
and
can
double
make
crossing.
zombies.
Well, there is a lot of voodoo that happens in this. There is essentially a rape scene of Jacqueline Bisset that's not really a rape, but it's a voodoo ritual that's performed upon her.
Yeah, not cool.
That's very violating. Well, when your girl gets a voodoo ritual performed upon her, what do you do the night after, that evening after you get her back safely back home?
Do that juju.
No, you put the moves on her, right? Yeah. If you're Nick Nolte, which is not good. That didn't play too well for me. Much like Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Eli Wallach gets the short end of the stick. He was actually on this ship that was shipwrecked and wants to go on the dive, and Robert Shaw's like, no, you stay back. So as a result, he double crosses the whole group. I'm like, another callback to Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Great, good job. There's a great amount of underwater photography, a shitload. Like I said, if you like diving, this is a great movie for you. Is there a monster? Sort of. There's a moray eel that is used to great effect in that it's discovered early in the film that it kind of hangs around the ship. And Nick Nolte uses that to his advantage and lures one of the Haitians into the clutches of the moray eel so he can get away. Beyond that, though, there's not a ton of direct similarity to the plot points of Jaws. It's just worth noting because it is a Peter Benchley story that also features Robert Shaw. That brings us to Joey leading off the third round.
Okay, so again, my third strain, if you will, of the Jaws knockoff is the Sharknado sphere of influence. There are so many of these movies.
They make
in the
one
wake.
every year.
Oh my God. Sharknado itself, that's probably around 20 years old now.
Yeah.
I don't know when the first one came out, but there are, I don't
There's
even,
like 7 of them.
I lost count. There's like 7 just Sharknado sequels, but then there's also Sharkano and Cocaine Shark and all these things. I think that this genre reached its nadir with 2022's Sharks in the Corn.
Sharks, is it like Children of the Corn?
It is a spoof of,
Yes.
shark movies.
How did they get in the corn? Because corn grows on land.
Well, it involves a druid cult. It's set in Kentucky, which
Makes sense.
seems like the...
Well, Kentucky is corn country.
Druid country.
It didn't make a whole lot of sense because Kentucky, is not synonymous with corn. But it's also very much landlocked, which seems like an odd place to find sharks. But there are sharks.
Maybe they got dropped there by a Sharknado, Joey.
Maybe, but actually they were summoned there by a druid cult, which has some sort of tie to Stonehenge, which doesn't even make any sense within the logic of the movie. They worship the sharks as this nature goddess kind of thing. This one was directed by Tim Ritter, whose filmography includes something called Zombarella's House of Horrors.
Older brother of John.
Horrors. If that gives you any indication of this guy's filmography. It is exactly what it sounds like. It's an ultra low budget spoof about sharks in a cornfield. There's a cult of shark worshippers. It's kind of more of a slasher than a Jaws knockoff per se, because many of the kills do happen at the hands of the Jaws of sharks in the corn, but most of them actually happen by a sort of serial killer who uses like fossilized jaws, like shark jaws, to kill his victims. No, to actually kill his victims.
Oh, wow.
The acting comes straight out of a porno. There's rubber sharks. There's very little attempt to make them look real. There's fake blood by the gallons. It is, in short, not the kind of movie you want to watch alone, which I did just this morning.
Did you get scared?
I did not get scared. I did get bored a few times.
Okay.
Had I been watching it with you guys,
and I get scared.
I would have had a good time, because it's that, it's that kind of film. I just think that this genre of the super self-aware spoof has its limits, and this is where it meets its limits.
There you go.
Fair.
Lovely. Todd.
All right. My final film is probably a perfect 10 on the Jaws ripoff scale. It is called Cruel Jaws. Obviously it has Jaws right there in the title. It's also known, I think, as perhaps Cruel Shark, because I think you pretty much described what the movie is. But also in some quarters, Jaws 5. That's
only
in some
Russia.
quarters. Well, so here's the thing about Italian genre cinema. Starting around the 70s, their producers were keeping a close eye on American cinema, and whatever was popular there, they were funding their directors to come up with their own versions / ripoffs
And there was
of those
probably
movies.
some legal loopholes where they could call it a sequel.
Well, and I'm about to get to that loophole thing, because there's some interesting things that make this the perfect 10 ripoff. So, first of all, Cruel Jaws, directed by this guy Bruno Mattei, and so none of you should know who he is, except
Because we don't talk about Bruno.
Yeah. But this will tell you something about his aesthetic. He was a close collaborator with a guy named Claudio Fragasso, who is the famous director, infamous, I should say, director of Troll 2.
Oh!
Fragasso wrote the screenplay for a lot of Mattei's movies. So if that gives you a sense of what this guy was dealing with. But Mattei made a series of Namsploitation / Rambo ripoffs in the late 80s, early 90s. Namsploitation. This is a genre.
Vietnam?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Strike Commando, Born to Fight, etc. These movies are all terrible, and they are all a hoot and fun to watch. In any case, so Bruno Mattei is essentially a hired gun for a lot of these producers to make their rip-off American versions of movies, and so he does Cruel Jaws, which came out in 1995. This movie is just so ridiculous. You mentioned Hulk Hogan. It is not actually Hulk Hogan. It is an actor named Richard Dew who looks like Hulk Hogan shrank in the dryer. Basically, he has Hulk
like
Hogan's.
Dink?
Yeah, he looks like he's Hulk Hogan he's got the the blonde balding shoulder length hair, the blonde handlebar mustache.
Okay,
so he's very clearly trying to look like Hulk Hogan.
Very clearly,
he
I
is
thought
not
it was
Hulk
him.
Hogan.
Okay.
No, when you see him, he is not Hulk Hogan's size. He's like 5'8" maybe.
Tall.
So
he's tall. Okay.
Yeah.
He's real tall. He can ride that slide.
Yeah. And maybe this is why the guy got the job. I don't know. He clearly was, because the mid-'90s was when Hogan was trying to do his, acting thing. The Nanny, etc. So you have this Richard Dew guy who sets the tone by looking like Hulk Hogan, and I'm sure everyone that sees the movie thinks that. So Cruel Jaws, the reason why it's sort of this perfect ripoff is because somehow, and I don't know the legality of it, you sort of indicated loopholes. They literally use unauthorized footage from the first 4 Jaws movies as part of this movie. Mm-hmm. So pretty much anytime you see an animatronic shark, it is footage from one of the 4 Jaws movies.
It's actual Jaws.
It's actual Jaws footage. And, of course, as I mentioned before, they use Jaws 5 in some locales in Italy to market the movie. The Italians are famous for this. Zombie 2, which was, of course, actually the first Zombie, which they were trying to market off of Dawn of the Dead, which they called Zombie over there. Anyway, so this is kind of an Italian genre cinema thing. Mm-hmm. So you have, so they're literally using scenes from Jaws as part of this movie. The dialogue in this thing is so ridiculous, but you have a Richard Dreyfuss type who's an expert on sharks. In this movie, he says a lot.
Nerd.
Yeah, the science nerd. He's actually a PhD student, I think. He says a lot of things, though, that sound scientifically questionable. But in any case, and then the ending of this movie, and here's the part that I found extra hilarious. They actually rip off a movie that I watched earlier in the week that's a terrible movie called Blood Deep. They ripped off the ending of that movie, including they used the same footage from that movie, where they lure the shark underwater, tie dynamite to this underwater structure, and then blow the shark up, and they use the same footage from Blood Deep, where the shark separates.
Yep.
And it's like, wow, you just ripped off the ending of a absolutely terrible movie. And then all the guys on the boat high-five each other, even though the shark is underwater. So how do they know they actually killed him anyway?
All the blood.
Yeah.
Clearly.
And when the shark separates, there's no blood. It separates. It's clearly like a paper mache shark or something anyway. So this movie, though, I could go on and on about the terrible dialogue and stuff. It's definitely worth a watch if you are a Mystery Science Theater buff. Okay. Don't watch it alone, though. Watch it with friends who have a similar aesthetic. That, and also for you guys, you can quip with one another.
Nice.
Because I kept looking over as I was watching this by myself, wishing someone was there for me to make a quip to.
Beautiful.
You need a volleyball that you draw.
I needed a Wilson. For this. Yeah. But anyway, for me, this is a perfect 10 on the rip-off Jaws scale. Because it literally
bleeds into illegality.
Does everything it can to try to... I looked in to try to figure out how it was able to get away with... I couldn't figure it out, but there must be some loopholes or something.
Yeah, it was the 70s, and the Italian film industry was developing later than the U.S. film industry, and there was not a bunch of lawyers working on international copyright law, and they were like, well, we can just do this. And if they sue us, hopefully we'll make enough money to pay it off.
Well, this actually came out in 95, though, so that explains some of the...
shit. Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, maybe the same...
Well, that blows my entire loophole theory
know.
out of the water.
Maybe they were just sampling it, hip-hop records.
What I wonder, though,
is... It was a real girl talk situation.
I wonder, though, if maybe... one other thing that I have to point out, this is important. Towards the end of the movie, there's a scene where the heroes are going off to sea to blow the shark up, and a very familiar sounding theme song plays, but not the one you're thinking of. Dun 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 dun.
Yes.
Superman?
They use that.
Star
They
Wars.
use the Star Wars theme
okay.
song, the first bars of it, and then they changed it a little bit.
Yep.
So
Sampled
I guess that
it.
was
They
the way
sampled
that they
it.
sampled it, quote unquote. But
It
it's
was a
just
mashup.
like, wow.
Travis, go.
All right, so my number 3 is Lake Placid. Lake Placid from 1999, one of the best years in cinema. It's a horror comedy film about a giant crocodile terrorizing a lake in Maine. Indeed, it bears some influence from the classic thriller Jaws. Here are 3 ways in which Lake Placid was influenced by Jaws. 1, creature as a central threat. Just like Jaws, Lake Placid centers around a monstrous creature as the central threat to the characters. In Jaws, it's a great white shark, obviously, while in Lake Placid, it's a massive man-eating crocodile. Both films build suspense and tension by keeping the creature hidden for much of the movie, revealing it gradually to heighten the sense of danger. Number 2, Small Town in Peril. Both films take place in a relatively isolated small town where the local authorities are initially skeptical or unprepared to deal with the threat. In Jaws, the action unfolds on Amity Island, a coastal resort town, and the mayor is reluctant to close the beaches. In Lake Placid, the story occurs in a remote, tranquil lakeside community, and local authorities are initially incredulous about the existence of a giant crocodile. The struggle to convince the town's leadership to take the threat seriously is a common thread between both films. Number 3, tension and dark humor. While Jaws is primarily a suspenseful thriller, it also incorporates moments of dark humor, especially through the interactions between the main characters. Similarly, Lake Placid blends horror elements with a healthy dose of dark comedy. The characters in Lake Placid often use humor as a coping mechanism in the face of danger, and their witty banter adds comedic elements to the film's otherwise terrifying premise. The blending of genres with a balance of tension and humor is a hallmark of both movies. In conclusion, Lake Placid was influenced by Jaws in several ways, including the use of a menacing creature as the primary threat, the small town setting facing an unexpected danger, and the combination of tensions and dark humor to engage the audience. These elements helped Lake Placid pay homage to the classic Jaws while creating its unique spin on the creature feature genre.
Wow. It seems like the last episode, or maybe a couple episodes back, you had no notes at all, and then you were like the complete opposite this time. Mm-hmm. Very thorough. Very impressive.
Well, thank you, sir.
I've seen this film, and the one thing that I remember about it is Rose.
Betty White?
Is Rose from the Golden Girls. Betty White feeding the crocodile.
Yeah, at the very end.
Yeah.
That's the final scene of the movie. She's the last little bit of comedic relief.
Yeah, she was the one that was funding the whole endeavor.
Yep.
All right, Travis. You ready to sing?
What am I going to sing?
I'm talking about Orca from 1977.
It doesn't have to be like this. Killer whales, killer whales.
Orca, 1977, directed by Michael Anderson of Logan's Run fame.
Oh, wow.
Starring Richard Harris,
Yeah.
Charlotte Rampling, Will Sampson, a.k.a. Chief from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah. Filmed at the Oregon State Mental Institution.
And Bo Derek.
Bo Derek, she's a 10. She's a perfect 10.
Music by Ennio Morricone.
Ennio Morricone.
So, this movie has provenance, yet it sucks to high hell. What you have is a Captain Ahab type character in Richard Harris. Mm-hmm. He gets this bloodlust. I'm going to kill a fucking orca. Mm-hmm. And he means to kill the male, but accidentally kills the female. And the male becomes this bloodlust, vengeance-filled killing machine. And he's going to go after him. Primarily shot in Labrador, the film has some problems. And anybody who saw Free Willy as a kid knows that...
Oh, different Free Willy. Sorry, I was thinking of a different movie.
The Bill Clinton administration.
Yes.
Orcas in the wild have a straight-up dorsal fin. Orcas in captivity, it flops over.
Yeah, like a dog that's upset.
So
Maybe in
anytime
captivity, they're just nervous.
Scientists really don't have an explanation for it other than maybe they just don't need it as much. But
Nervous.
No, I think it's that they're sad.
it's performance anxiety. We
it's a
all
dorsal
suffer from
frown.
I got you, Todd.
it. It's yeah.
Sorry.
This never happens.
It's called a
to
whiskey
them.
fin.
Whiskey fin. Thank you. So they
Swear to God, baby,
So the
this
film
never happened to me.
the film alternates shots between like SeaWorld type shots and in the wild shots, and it's like the fins like up down up down. So that's annoying. But it was also shot between Labrador and Malta, which are completely different environments.
Completely different dogs.
So the entire film centers around the fact that you've got Charlotte Rampling, who is playing the Richard Dreyfuss type character. She's the She's the expert on orcas. Richard Harris, of course, kind of is almost like a Quint character, but Quint had much more respect for the shark, I think, whereas Harris was just like, I'm going to kill it. Boy, he really regretted that decision because this fucking orca chased them everywhere.
Speaking of, in recent current events, in news, killer whales are attacking fishing ships, right? Have you guys seen this in the news? Mm-hmm. Orcas are systematically and seemingly like as a team attacking human boats. This is that movie.
Pretty much, yeah.
They're smarter than we think, you guys.
And that's even brought up in the film. Rampling puts it in Harris's head that, you know, the orcas have a higher intelligence, and so he ascribes this whole scenario that, you know, there's this vengeful orca that can be reasoned with somehow.
Okay.
And it's furthered by
A series of squeaks and squeals.
Right. And it's furthered by Will Sampson, who plays your stereotypical indigenous person. So he's ascribing this really deep meaning to what's been done to wrong this whale. And Harris kind of buys into this. Ultimately, it culminates in the orca picking off every single person throughout the film, except for Harris and Rampling, as he chases them further and further up north into the ice shelf. And it's essentially a dead end. And it's the most ridiculous ending, which culminates in Charlotte Rampling surviving and getting rescued by, you know, the Coast Guard, or the Canadian version thereof.
Do you pull for the orca in this
Absolutely.
film? I was going to say, it sounds like...
Absolutely. The orca is the hero in this movie, which is the switcheroo that on the whole Jaws knockoff. He is the total hero because his wife was taken from him. There is even a fucking orca funeral in this movie.
Does he have a specific set of skills?
Yeah. Absolutely. I eat people. So, besides the salty dog and the scientist, you can't call the orca the killing machine because the orca is ascribed a certain amount of intelligence and conscience.
As are the sharks in the sequels of Jaws, but they're still very much played as the villains.
Yeah. There are some ridiculous elements in this. The orca is actually pushing around like small icebergs in this final scene where he's like pushing the iceberg to crash in to where it's silly. I would recommend watching it. It's kind of fun in a goofy, stupid kind of way.
How do you know
your description of this movie made me think that it's probably a much better film than Jaws.
Oh, I don't think so. Because it really does lag and drag quite a bit. And it's kind of predictable. The meaning that the people on shore ascribe to what's going on with the orcas is completely disassembled throughout the film by the orca itself. The orca's like, I'm just a fucking... Orca, yeah. So, there we go. We've got a lot of knockoffs.
I think we did it.
They come in many flavors. They come in many varieties. All right, so we're going to wrap up. Let the listener decide what they want about these knockoffs, but I think this is fun. Next week, we're going to attack Gremlins. So we'll be back next week with yet another knockoff-themed episode.
For spooky season.
Yes. Before we go, let's go around the room. Anybody got plugs?
Yeah. I want to plug the new Netflix Wes Anderson movie The Wonderful Life of Charlie Sugar or something
It's
like
41 minutes long.
It's a short film.
I saw this last night.
You watched it?
Yeah.
And what did you think?
It's great.
I thought it was incredible.
It's the way that it's made. It's basically the entire text of the Roald Dahl short story, and it's instead of an audiobook version of the story, it's like a video book version of the story. Very much in Wes Anderson's visual style.
Yes.
It's great.
It stars Benedict Cumbersnatch.
Yes, Benedict Cucumber Snatch.
Gotcha.
I loved it the way that Wes Anderson loves vintage aesthetics.
Nice, lovely. Todd, you got anything to plug-ish?
There is a movie from the 70s that I discovered in the Criterion Collection's high school horror collection that I thought was really interesting, called Massacre at Central High. And I never heard of this movie, and it kind of threw me for a loop. It was not what I was expecting at all, but it was very satirical. It was, but also very graphic and violent, like you would probably expect from the 70s. But it was kind of like a metaphor for like fascism. So in other words, at the beginning of the movie, it's the order that you would expect, where you have the athletes and the rich kids who are the bullies. But then there's a certain point in the movie where the quote unquote good guys get the upper hand and take control, and then they become shitheads. But they become shitheads.
Power corrupts.
It sounds like the Sanford prison experiment.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah.
But it's a very interesting. It's not perfect, but it's a very interesting movie. I would recommend people check it out.
Joey, plugs?
Just got a royalty check today.
Awesome.
For $14.
Nice.
Which book?
My short story collection. I have always been here before.
Nice.
So
Very
I'll plug
good.
that one, and there's also an anthology. I don't have a story in this one, but I did edit it, and it is available from Malarkey Books, and it came from the swamp, and it is a cryptid themed anthology.
Sweet.
That's malarkey.
My plugs. You've got to watch Changeling.
I'm not going to watch it.
You got to watch it.
I don't have
Oh, with George C. Scott?
No, the Apple TV series with Lakeith Stanfield.
Okay.
It's good. Give it 3 episodes. You think you know what it's about, but you really don't. The other is Talk to Me.
Talk to Me is amazing, and
Really
apparently
good movie.
right now it costs $20 to rent on whatever streaming service. But let me tell you right now, it is worth it.
Get
It
four
is
get
worth
4
it.
friends together,
Yes,
and watch it
Throwing
together
$5
because it will be even
so worth it. It's
It's-
the best horror movie of 2023, hands down.
Yeah. So do yourself a favor and check that out. That's it for us today. Please follow us on all of our social medias. It's
Cinema Chop Shop,
except for YouTube.
where it's Cinema Chop Shop Podcast.
Absolutely. Like us, subscribe, rate us, review us, all that good shit.
Please like us.
And we will be back next week with more knockoff shit. And in the meantime, please remember to watch, chop, retrofit.
Hey man, knock it off.